It's 2013, and Steven Soderbergh has been talking about retirement for years. In a 2009 interview with Esquire, he suggested he would do so at age 51, his 25th year of filmmaking, which would have been 2014. In 2010, Matt Damon confirmed Soderbergh had been talking about it for years and that the date was getting closer. And now, it seems, the time has come. Soderbergh's last movie before retirement. He's about to actually sort of do it. So is the film he goes out on his Citizen Kane, his Heaven's Gate, his Megalopolis?
I really love how you scripted this exchange, so it sounds like I just have no idea what's about to happen. So
Play along, Mike. Play along.
okay. Okay. So yeah. I assume it would have to be what Soderbergh conceive of as his magnum opus, his you shouldn't have said Megalopolis. That ruined that ruined the whole thing. So I can't do this. I can't do it. His retirement movie is a made-for-TV film about Liberace.
But it's HBO, so it's prestige TV. And maybe he's giving us a hint of what he plans to get up to during his so-called retirement.
Maybe. Welcome, everyone, to the Filmographers podcast, where we study a director's career one film at a time. I'm Michael Moreci.
And I'm Keir Graff. In our first season, we're turning the spotlight on Steven Soderbergh, one of Hollywood's most fascinating and versatile directors. Mike, please kick us off with your one-sentence summary of Behind the Candelabra.
So, in the last movie Steven Soderbergh would ever make, pinky promise, no takebacks, this is it. Farm boy veterinarian Scott Thorson's life is turned upside down, and he's introduced to a world of opulence, gold, feathers, more gold. But the question is, in this dynamic between him and the famous Liberace, who is using who?
You ask an excellent question, Mike. After all, the real Scott Thorson claims he was straight until he shacked up with Liberace. In the cinematic exploration of their relationship, the pianist is played by Michael Douglas and Thorson is played by Matt Damon. This is also the second of their collaborations in which Damon gets to wear a fake nose.
Yeah, he should just play Cyrano and be done. Is it Cyrano? Is that how you say it, right?
Cyrano?
Cyrano. I should say Cyrano is more like it, right?
Cyrano's. Anyway, in today's episode, we'll be going behind the story of Behind the Candelabra. But first, after the break, we'll be taking a look at some upcoming movies that weren't directed by Steven Soderbergh in our winter movie preview.
You're a colorful bunch.
Keir, you know what's funny about summer blockbusters?
That most of them aren't actually any good.
Fair. That's probably more disappointing than funny. Actually, I was thinking that, in my opinion, most of the time going to the movies is the last thing that I want to do when the sun is shining and cold Midwestern air is not blasting straight in my face.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Well, I definitely like beating the heat in a cool, air-conditioned movie theater a few times during the summer. But generally speaking, I'd much rather cozy up in a theater during the winter months.
Yeah, me too. And I feel like winter movies, with their mix of you get your Thanksgiving blockbusters and the Oscar baity dramas, they can be just as fun and compelling and big as summer releases, sometimes even more so.
Wait, is this episode brought to us by Winter Cinema?
No, but kind of also, maybe a little, because before we dive back into our discussion about Behind the Candelabra, his Soderbergh's final movie, we're going to discuss the movies that will be coming to your multiplex in the coming months.
Not only are we going to discuss them, but we're going to have them face off against each other in a fight to the death, just like the warriors of old Rome.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
So at the risk of drawing Maximus's ire, I think we ought to get started with our winter cinematic battle to the death.
Harsh, but I'm in. Who are our first contestants?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. This is a good one. So speaking of Maximus, our first round, and we have titles for all these rounds. So round one is the Turkey Day Challenge, as we're going to pit Wicked versus Gladiator 2. Here, you can only see one of these movies. Which Gladiator 2 or Wicked? Which one are you choosing, Keir?
Well, this feels like a battle between, Russell Crowe and a, skinny, unarmed theater kid. I'm definitely going to pick Gladiator 2. Nothing against the musical theater folks, but I'd rather watch the sword fighting. I'd rather see, how they update this Swords and Sandals modern classic. And Wicked, I'm honest, I haven't read the book. I haven't seen the show. I have watched the excruciatingly long trailer. It feels like Harry Potter for, I don't know, theater nerds. Maybe the songs are fantastic, but I think I'm less likely to enjoy that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Wicked feels like it's coming like 10 years too late for me. Like, I wouldn't have cared 10 years ago either, but I also don't like there being a little deceptive because it's actually Wicked Part 1. This is somehow this is somehow two movies. They're squeezing the first movie that's coming out is longer than the Broadway musical, and it's only half. So
it's another Harry Potter Part 7, right? Speaking of Harry Potter, it's we're gonna milk this for two movies.
Yeah, I that's exactly what's happening here. But they're not. I think Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, the way that was marketing as two movies, I think that scared people away. I think Mission Impossible's that Dead Reckoning movie, which is fantastic. I think the reason that movie underperformed, I don't think it underperformed a ton, but underperformed a little, was more about Oppenheimer and Barbie, which came out last, there's nobody could compete with that. But I think people are also, I think they got a little concerned about that. So they're hiding the fact that this is Wicked Part 1. But either way, Gladiator Part 2, Ridley Scott, Denzel Washington looks like he is like chewing, just eating the scenery in this movie in the best way possible. And I want to see every second of it. So far, the reviews have been great. I'm not a huge Gladiator fan, but they're going to flood the Coliseum. There's going to be more sword fighting. I love what's his name? Paul Pascal.
Pedro Pascal.
Pedro Pascal, Paul Mescal. Yeah, they're both in this movie.
Right, which is confusing. I found that a little confusing.
I found it confusing, but he's a great up and coming guy. It's exciting to see him work with somebody like Ridley Scott. So that's going to be really cool. So I am in for Gladiator 2 as well. So we'll go to round 2, Keir. This is going to be
before we go on to round 2.
Oh, yes.
Do you feel that Denzel Washington, as he enters elder statesman mode, is becoming our new Morgan Freeman? Because I feel like with the kind of oratorial voice and the gravitas he brings, I really feel like he's stepping up.
Yeah, I guess you can say that. I don't know that Morgan Freeman was ever quite as big as Denzel, not like in terms of popularity, but Denzel's presence is just, and he projects
literally big,
and his projection is just so grand. Like I just love. He did the Coens. What was the black and white Shakespeare that he did?
Macbeth.
Macbeth, yeah. I was gonna say Hamlet. I'm like, no, it's not that. Macbeth,
and that was fantastic.
Awesome,
so
awesome.
Good.
Yes, yeah, loved it. So, yeah, I guess you could say Denzel is stepping into that role, but still, thoroughly Denzel.
Yeah, absolutely.
So round two, Keir, you introduce the next one. I'll do one more. This is the kids round. I'm very interested in what you're going to say here. We have for the kids round one, because there's going to be two of these. Moana
Yeah.
2 versus Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
Oh, yeah. So my first thought was like, wait, is death an option? And then so, full disclosure for anybody watching or listening. So I am a dad. My kids are now 18 and 20. So I'm no longer obligated to take them to matinees. I was always trying to show them classic films that I liked. But I did not see Moana, which I'm sure I should have, although the rest of my family actually saw Moana and liked it quite a bit. Sonic, I'm not into movies based on video games. I was telling Mike before we started recording, I don't know anything about video games that weren't on the Atari 2600. So I think the only reason I would want to see Sonic is just I'll watch Jim Carrey and literally anything. But I think I've got to say Moana 2. It looks better. It feels like it's going to be a more engaging story. I like the animation looks a lot more pleasing to the eye, and I heard good things from people in my family. So I would do Moana 2.
This might be the surprise of the preview. I'm going Sonic 3. I'm not kidding. Sonic 1 and 2 are pretty awesome. Like Jim Carrey is like, I don't know who convinced him or how they convinced him to go like full Ace Ventura Jim Carrey again. It's the weirdest selection for him that he was like, I'm an artist now, I'm giving up, but I will do this for Sonic. I will do this. And it's incredible. I love his character. I love what he's doing in there.
Yeah.
I love James Marsden, man. James Marsden is like, he's like our Aaron Eckhart. He's like the one that got away, like I really enjoy James Marsden. He's this unsung guy that like he's in everything. But if you ask, most people like who James Marsden and their face turns up into him. I think I know, like I just like seeing him in successful things, I guess.
I agree. And I would love to watch both of those guys. It's just like, could we take out the hedgehog?
Well, there's more hedgehogs in this one. So no, you got Knuckles. We have Dark Sonic in 3. You know what? We're gonna save this for the Sonic the Hedgehog podcast, but I'm going Sonic 3.
I will say one interesting thing when I was watching the trailer for this. I was a couple weeks ago, I was teaching a writing workshop and I was talking about ways to create more compelling villains. And one of them is to kind of make your villain a dark mirror of your hero. And I was like, oh, we got this Dark Sonic. This is literally what I was talking about. So, I guess
you have no excuses, Keir.
Maybe I have Sonic to see 3. It. Maybe I have to see it. All right. Moving along. So the indie darlings category, we've got one that's actually already out, one that has been screening at festivals and isn't quite out yet. Anora versus The Brutalist. Mike, who's your fighter?
Well, full disclosure, I've actually seen The Brutalist already. I saw it at the Music Box at the Chicago Film Festival. Yes, that's, as the kids would say, that's my flex for this episode.
Nice.
I've seen The Brutalist, and I'll tell you what, I'm not going to spoil too much about The Brutalist. I would have picked Anora no matter what. I love Sean Baker. The Florida Project, I think, is one of the best movies of this century, probably. I love Red Rocket. I think he's just absolutely just a fantastic. Like he reminds me of Soderbergh in a way, that this singular independent voice. Like he doesn't do the genre hopping and stuff like that like Soderbergh does, but he's just, that aside, such a fascinating filmmaker, great chronicler of human character, and I love that. I can't wait to see Anora. Now, I did see The Brutalist. I will say I enjoyed it. I think for a movie that's damn near 4 hours, I wish it had more on its mind. Like, I just wish it had the third act, it kind of came undone for me. But again, I don't want to say too much, but no matter what, I would have gone with Anora, easy.
So I feel like I have to choose the thing I was going to choose before I got your review of The Brutalist. I mean, I honestly both, I want to see both for sure. Yesterday, my wife and I went to a matinee and we had a tough choice between Anora and The Substance, and we ended up going with The Substance, which I don't regret because I loved it. I thought it was fantastic with a couple of cavils. Anora looks like it's going to be a gorgeous film. I agree with you. I think Baker's really one to watch. Florida Project, I agree, was terrific. I think that it's almost the topic of Anora that makes me hesitate a tiny bit. And almost the fact that it looks so gorgeous. Is this like an art house film? You know, is this an art house Pretty Woman? Like, I don't know. Like, there's just a little part of me that distrusts the concept of that movie, but I'm going to see it anyway. I'm sure I'm going to love it. Based on what I know about the two movies, I think I would choose The Brutalist. Partly because I'm a fan of brutalist architecture. I'm one of those weirdos. I love looking at big, weird cement, Soviet post-war, architecture. It looks like,
boy, will you love this.
Yes, finally. Yeah, and I know that puts me in the minority. The trailers I thought for both were excellent and very compelling. I love Adrian Brody. He's always very watchable. I'm a little concerned about the length of The Brutalist, but a film about an architect struggling and an immigrant, and I know there's some Holocaust themes. Like, it feels Oscar baity, but it feels like something that I really want to watch.
Yeah, and I say I enjoyed it, and I am in the minority of not loving it. I'll see it again. I still enjoyed it. I still enjoyed it a lot, and I think it's. Yeah. There was some things that I was in awe of, so like that don't let me dissuade anyone. All right, next round, Christmas Day Challenge. Which movie are you leaving your family to go see? Are you going to see Nosferatu, the new film from Robert Eggers, or are you going to see Baby Girl?
Oh man, so that's so interesting. Like, sometimes I wonder, is my newfound dislike of Nicole Kidman tied to the fact that we have to watch that crappy trailer before every film at an AMC?
Doesn't help.
It does not help. Anybody who hasn't seen the SNL parody of that, Google it now. It's fantastic. I just think she's an actor who's like we've had diminishing returns. You could argue that, boy, and I feel like this is really tricky ground, but I would even say that like she's kind of like limited her acting instrument by getting so much plastic surgery. Her face isn't expressive as it used to be. I also feel like that's a dangerous subject because like I don't want to be weighing in on like what women should do with their bodies.
Have you seen The Substance by chance?
I was about to bring that up. Yeah, The Substance is a great great conversational salvo on that topic. So anyway, I'm not going to go there. I just feel like as an actor, like I don't connect with her in the last 10, 15 years very much. And it feels dangerously close to 50 Shades of Grey to me. Eggers is somebody who I feel like I have a complicated relationship with, but his films are always great looking. I think Nosferatu is a great topic for a film by him. Yeah, for me, it's really not much of a challenge. I'm going to skip out on Christmas and go see Nosferatu.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. This is a slam dunk for me, being someone who loves horror, somebody I love Nosferatu. I love Eggers, even though like I don't always love his movies. Like I thought the Lighthouse left me a little cold. The Northman I really enjoy. It had Nicole Kidman in it, weirdly. Northman I really enjoy. I wish it had done a little bit more in certain areas, but The Witch is so good, and that gives him currency with me for a very, very long time. The trailers for Nosferatu look absolutely spectacular. The movie looks great. I love the cast. Like, it feels like this is a project that he was just meant to do. So I'm fully in on Nosferatu. Yeah, that's an easy one for me. There's something else I was going to add about Nosferatu and Eggers, but now I can't think of it. But point being, definitely Nosferatu. Baby Girl, I really don't have any interest whatsoever.
Yeah. Agreed. Okay, next round. Awards bait, round 1. There will be another round. First round, Nickel Boys versus September 5th.
Yeah, Nickel Boys is an easy one. I think we're going to be aligned here because um, I, maybe I'm making things up, but I like Colson Whitehead a lot. I haven't read this novel. I've read The Intuitionist. I read John Henry Days. I think he's a fascinating guy. I've seen him read, and he's just so interesting and oh my gosh, so smart. Just wildly intelligent and writes these great books. I've heard something about Nickel Boys was unfortunately fucking spoiled for me at the
Oh,
blue list. I had these film bros sitting behind me who are just like they're talking clearly to be heard. You know how that goes? Like it's
oh
like
yeah.
yes, they're talking for people to be heard, and they saw Nickel Boys and they ruined something that, and I'm not going to say it. They ruined something that I didn't know, which I would have been pleasantly surprised not knowing
Yeah.
this thing about the movie. So thank you, Film Bros, for I hope you're satisfied that people overheard you wanting to be overheard. Keir, you and I are not film bros. We are film fans. We are film nice guys. That's what we are.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't believe that film fandom includes film bros. Just there are plenty of things to be broy about. Leave film out of it, right?
So yeah,
We
gosh,
are fans. We are
we're
fans.
fans. By the way, I was sitting, in front of them, and I was sitting directly next to. He came and sat down next to me, Michael Phillips, our good friend Michael Phillips.
Right
And
on.
yeah, and I was going to say hi to him. I've met him before, and this is what a film nice guy slash nerd that I am. I couldn't even bring. I've met him before. He's
Yeah.
friends with one of my good friends. I could have talked to him, but it was like I was like sitting next to fucking Mick Jagger. I was like, I can't. I can't say hi. I don't like he's doing his thing. I don't want to interrupt him. So I did not speak to Michael Phillips for, we were there for 4 hours together. Didn't say a word. Um, so
That's yeah.
yeah,
That's the opposite of film bro.
right. Yeah. I mean, part of me feels like I blew it. But anyway, I'm going with Nickel Boys. I'm really excited to see it. It's actually playing at the Black Harvest Festival at the Gene Siskel Center, which is going to be, I'm going to try to catch it there. If not, I think it's a January release. But yeah, Nickel Boys for me. How about you?
I found this one really difficult, actually, partly because I mean, I agree with you. I'm a big fan of Whitehead. I haven't read too many of his books, but I've read a couple, and I think he's a brilliant writer. Oh my God. Back in the days when Twitter was good, he was also one of the best people on Twitter. He's so smart. He's so funny. He's so quick. He's so thoughtful. So I have no doubt that it's a great book, and I'm very interested in seeing this movie despite knowing very little about it. And that's usually the way I prefer to engage with a movie, is to know as little as possible about it before I go see it. However, and I also was kind of like with September 5th, I was kind of like, wait, we didn't, Spielberg make Munich. Um,
Right.
I feel like there's this topic that's been treated a lot, but I freaking have a weakness for journalism movies, and it looks good, and it looks like it's going to really wrestle with ethics of I mean, this is, we're in an election cycle right now where there's a lot of meaty discussions to be had about the role of journalism and how we cover, real life catastrophes and complicated subjects. And I think from, admittedly, the trailer, it looks like they're going to do a good job of talking about that. And yeah, so I'm a sucker for that genre. So honestly, like to me, this is a deadlock. This feels like a coin toss. I feel like the coin could land either way for me. So I hate to wuss out, but I'm going to call this one a tie. I might have to watch, two movies in that awards bait round one.
But is the coin you're tossing a nickel? It could
Now,
sway
if
it.
I was smarter, I would have actually had a nickel and tossed it right here, and then I could choose the winner.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I'm definitely gonna see September 5th, 2 or September 5. I don't know what they're calling it, but I'm interested in it for the same reasons. But I like Whitehead a lot. I'm interested in adaptation. Really quick aside, I do remember I was gonna say on Nosferatu, and this is something important. About 2 weeks ago, I took my son to go see, I don't know if I told you about this, at our local theater, Nosferatu, the original version, but it was synced to Radiohead music.
Oh, wow.
It was Kid A and Amnesiac, and it was amazing. It was terrific. Like the music worked so well. My son was like blown. He never saw Nosferatu. He's blown.
Yeah.
He loves Radiohead. The house was packed. And there's a series of these. So it's called Silence Synced. I know it's hard to say. I wish they would have found
Yeah.
a different name for this. That's the website as well. Silence
Yeah.
Silence Synced. And there's going to be more. There's like movies, I guess they're going to be to Pearl Jam, REM, they might be Giants. Like there's this lineup, and it doesn't say what movies they are, but all these movies that are going to be synced, the silent films, they're going to be synced to these really amazing bands. And Nosferatu was the first one. I think the experiment worked beautifully. So if these come, and that's still traveling around, so if these come anywhere near you, go see it. Yeah, I think they're going to play around us here, that the Nosferatu again, because it was so successful. Highly recommended.
Sounds wonderful.
But now, so anyway, on to the show. We have awards bait round 2. Tis the season. So we've got A Complete Unknown versus Night Bitch.
This one's easy for me. Night Bitch. I haven't read that book. I want to read it. I love the concept. Of those who don't know, it's a mom stressed out by the pressures of parenthood, like literally becomes like a dog prowling the neighborhood at night. It's kind of like it's a Wolfman story in a way, dog woman story. I think it looks very engaging. I don't want to stir up any controversy by hating on Timothée Chalamet. I will just say, I think he's good in some things. I think he's not great in other things. I think he's great in Dune. I don't think he's Bob Dylan. I've watched the trailer a couple of times. He can kind of pull off the very youngest Bob Dylan, but Bob Dylan is a weirdo misanthrope guy with lots of rough edges. Timothée Chalamet, to me, does not have those rough edges. And, and we'll be talking about biopics and getting into that later on in this episode when we talk about Behind the Candelabra. So, people's mileage on the very concept of a biopic may vary, but I'm not particularly interested in watching Timothée Chalamet beat Dylan. And besides, if I want a movie like that, the Coen brothers already made that better.
Ooh, that's a great point. Yeah, that's a really, really great point. I like that a lot. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm close on A Complete Unknown because I really like James Mangold. It's funny. His last movie was Indiana Jones, which I'm sorry, was an absolute disaster. Nothing worked. It hurts my heart to think about that movie. But then he also has made great movies like that. I think Ford versus Ferrari is fantastic. I love that movie. I love Copland. There's so many things that he's done that I really, really like. So, and I want to see him bounce back from Indiana Jones. I want him to never do a movie like that again. But I'm not a huge Dylan guy. I'm not a huge Chalamet guy. So there's just a little bit of lacking interest. I do love Amy Adams. I think she's one of our best performers. I think this movie looks weird as hell. And like being a parent, you kind of, there's a certain amount of like, I get it, like how you can just go feral, like in a way, like, so yeah, I think Night Bitch, it's getting a weird reaction, but I don't really care. I think it looks like an interesting movie and I like Amy Adams. So I'm in for that.
Yeah. And let me just add to, on A Complete Unknown, that like, even though, I'll probably end up seeing it. And even though I'm inclined to think that Chalamet is not going to do well as Dylan, I want to say that every time I go to a movie and sit down, like I want the movie to succeed. I'm not one of those people who's looking for reasons that it failed. I want to be wrong. And so, again, Film Nice Guys, that's our brand, I guess, if we have an evolving one. I definitely don't want to be the sneering film bro who's saying like, yeah, just like I thought Chalamet didn't nail. I mean, maybe he does. Maybe he pulls it off. Maybe he'll win me over. But for that reason, I'm going to prioritize Night Bitch.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's a good call.
Round 2 of For the Kids, Dogman versus Paddington in Peru. Mike, you've got kids. You're closer to this genre than me.
Yeah, this is tough for me. I'll be honest, because I think these are the hardest ones because I really like all these movies. Well, no, Moana never. I saw some of Moana, and I'm so kind of averse to The Rock at this point that anything he's involved with, I just kind of already am like kind of want to put out the door. But my kids have grown up on Dogman, and I think those books, they get a little watered down the more they go. I wish the Dave Pilkey, I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Dave, I think.
Dave without the okay, whatever. Would sure, man. I wish he would slow down a little bit because the output has been tremendous. And even my kids are like, eh. I mean, they're getting a little older, but they were never into like the Cat Kid and this kind of stuff. But then nonetheless, I've spent the last 10 years being like, how the hell is there not a Dog Man movie? Like, how does this not exist? And now it does exist. And I've seen the trailer. It looks hilarious. I think the books are hilarious. I think they're cool. I think they're fun. I am just wildly intrigued by what this will be. I saw he also had the Captain Underpants. Pilkey does that. I thought that movie was great. So I'm fully in for this. I love the Paddington movies too. It's so hard because those Paddington movies are so amazing, but this new one doesn't have the same director who did the first two. Doesn't mean I forget who's doing the new one. I apologize. Doesn't mean that they won't do a competent job, but that director really nails something with those Paddington movies. They're so terrific. So I have a slight reservation with a new director with Paddington in Peru and a lot of enthusiasm and interest for a Dog Man movie. I want it. I'm gonna take my kids and I think we're gonna love it.
But are you going to bring them to Dog Man the musical? I believe it's coming back to the Studebaker Theater in the Fine Arts Building where I sit right now. They had it last year, and I think it's coming back.
Yeah, I might. We were gonna go. I can't remember why we did it, but I might take him to that. At least my young. I don't know if my oldest would be. No, he still would be into it. I think he'd still be into it. I think that'd be fun. Yeah, we might. Yeah.
So my kids, were just aging out of that level of book when Dog Man started kind of taking off, I think. And I know those have been wildly successful for sure. So I haven't read those books. It looks fun. It looks fine. I would definitely, again, because now we're picturing me going by myself, not with kids. I would definitely lean towards the Paddington movie, partly because it's, I like that.
One for Dog Man, please.
Yeah. Partly because I feel like I have this weird thing where I feel like there aren't enough movies made for kids that have like real people in them. Everything's animated. And I feel like when I was growing up, there were all these great, well, not great. They were lame, but they were fine for me at the time. Disney movies that were live action. And I think there's something about to me, we often talk about movies being machines for empathy, Ebert's great quote, and I feel like when kids are encountering films at an early age, I think cartoons are great. Obviously animation is wonderful, but I think it's also important that they kind of have some fictionalized versions of storytelling that involve seeing real people. I don't know, it's this weird thing I've got. And so I'm kind of intrigued by that. I also like, I love Fantastic Mr. Fox. So I like anything that's got that kind of animation where it's sort of like a real creature looking thing, whether it's claymation, animation, furmation, whatever it is, CGI, but just something that that kind of three-dimensional animal effect. I'm a sucker for that. I love it. So yeah, You go Paddington.
Good call. Yeah, it's neck and neck. Yeah, I don't know. You have a great point about that. It reminds me of the live action. Are you familiar with the movie The 5,000 Fingers of, is it Mr. T or Dr. T or whatever?
Yeah, I think it's Mr. T. I think it's Mr. T. But yes, that's an amazing movie.
Do you know who that's one of his top 5 favorite movies is Steven Soderbergh.
Soderbergh. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So, which is, I think it's an animation hybrid. I've never seen it. I've always wanted.
No, it's live action. It's all live action.
All live action. It's based on a Dr. Seuss book.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's musical, I think.
Sort of.
Yeah. I'm meaning to watch it.
I don't know if they actually sing songs, but there's a lot of music in it and a lot of playing of music. I don't.
Okay.
But I do remember it's mind-blowing. It'd be great with your kids. It's great as an adult, and it would probably also be great, if you were microdosing. So I don't know.
Why not do all three?
Yeah. That way you don't have to run around your neighborhood like a dog.
Yeah. Wow, we're covering a lot of ground here. Speaking of running around your neighborhood like a dog, we are on to the final round, which is the horror, and we have Wolfman running around your neighborhood like a dog. Wolfman versus Presence. Keir.
Easy. Presents. Absolutely easy. I mean, Wolfman looks like a fun update. I really like the actress who from Ozark who's in this. I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. I'm sure it's a perfectly good Wolfman, but there's no question it's Presence. It's Soderbergh. It's Soderbergh doing a ghost story. He's trying something new. Obviously we've been spending this whole year talking about Steven Soderbergh. I can't wait to see this in a theater.
Yeah, I'm with you. I admit I am excited to see Wolfman. Don't get me wrong. I think I've said this before. The Universal movies are some of my favorite things in the world. I have seen them, all of them, countless times, and not just the monster movies, but the weird, also Universal general horror, the Black Cats and what have you. And I like Lee Wanell. I liked his take on The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss. I thought that was a really good movie. So I'm interested to see what he does now with Wolfman, how he brings some sort of contemporary relevance to the character, to the idea. So I think it's going to be really cool. And I will see it, but yeah, Presence is a absolute slam dunk for all the reasons you already said. It's new for him. It's different. It's gotten just wonderful reviews from its festival run. So yeah, I love the concept. I like the people in it. I'm very enthusiastic. I'm dying to see this movie. So absolutely Presence for me.
Fantastic.
So Keir, now that we finished up our winter movie previews, so we're still thinking of the winter season. You and I've got our own movie coming out this winter.
Well, that's a bit of a stretch.
You're right. I mean, November doesn't feel like winter at all. November 19th, as a matter of fact. That's what the stretch was. But it's still, November 19th could very well feel like winter here in Chicago.
Yeah, this is sadly true. It often does. We've had some balmy breezes, but it can turn in an instant, and that cold hawk blows in off the lake, and our noses freeze. But what Mike is talking about is that we are hosting our very first live event with a screening of one of our favorite Soderbergh movies, The Limey.
Tell me. Tell me about Jenny. Tell me about Jenny. Tell me about Jenny. I needed money.
Yes, our first live event. I cannot wait. And perfect movie, The Limey. It landed in both of our top 5 lists, and it topped yours, if I'm not mistaken.
It was my number one. We did our top 5 in a recent episode of the first half of Soderbergh's career. And yeah, absolutely. That was my top pick. I just can't get enough of that movie, from Terrence Stamp's, I mean, oh my God, just his performance, his presence, to the non-linear cut, to the dreamy feeling it evokes. I mean, I think every time I talk about that feeling, I end up just talking about feeling transported. I do every time I watch it. It's a rich, layered movie. I love talking about it. And try to get me to shut up about it.
Well, save it, because we're going to be talking a lot about it at this live event. We're going to be introducing it. It's going to be a special screening at the Classic Cinemas at Lake Theater, which is in Oak Park here in Illinois. It's going to be on November 19th at 7 p.m. We're also going to have a Q&A afterwards. So it's going to be a full, pretty cool event of seeing the movie on the big screen, and we'll do our thing beforehand, give some context, and talk to the audience afterwards. It's going to be a fun time.
And the timing is perfect because, believe it or not, this year marks the 25th anniversary of the release of The Limey.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I mean, but yeah, that whole class of 1999, which it was amongst that great film year, 25 years since then. It's incredible. But if you are in or around Chicagoland area, like I said, in Oak Park, please join us. Come geek out with us about The Limey. Let's celebrate Steven Soderbergh. Let's have a movie friends night. And just, in my opinion, because this is my local theater, we can go and all enjoy some of the best movie theater popcorn in the Midwest.
Fantastic. Now visit classiccinemas.com/limey for more. That is, if you want to type this in one keystroke at a time, http://classiccinemas.com/limey, Limey.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Liberace.
This is my friend, Scott Thorson. You were incredible out there.
Well, this must be fate. I have a great idea. Why don't you come work for me?
As what?
I want to be everything to you, Scott. I want to be father, brother, lover, best friend.
I'll do whatever you want.
I want you to make Scott look like this. You will make me feel so young.
Why would a grown man want to adopt another grown man?
So we can be family.
All I do is give and give and give.
I can't live like this.
You're being paranoid, Scott. Are you stoned?
I'm not. I'm upset. Don't change the subject.
I don't even have my own face!
No one has ever been closer to me than this young man.
Now that we've made our way through the winter of 2024 to 2025, let's get back to 2013 and Soderbergh's last movie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the time specifically. I remember him announcing he's retiring. I remember him, actually retiring. I remember him coming back, all that stuff. But we weren't as, deep into Soderbergh as we are now. I wonder, and I wish there was some way to tell, like, I wonder if people really thought he was going to retire for good. Like, it seems like, after 26 movies in like 25, 24, however many years it was, not many, like there's a very compulsive, as we've talked about, work ethic here. Like, did anyone in Hollywood really think that he would not come back? Did they not realize how much he loves making movies and that he just wouldn't be able to step away from just that process alone? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I suspect that people were taking it with a grain of salt, but it is really interesting because it's a huge part of his kind of mythology. I mean, I was talking to Brian, the film loving elevator operator here at the Fine Arts Building, who we've both spoken with about Soderbergh. And, when I told him we were recording Behind the Candelabra today, he brought up the retirement, like it looms large in Soderbergh's, story, this idea that he retired, because nobody does that. Like, nobody willingly retires or steps away. So regardless, and we'll talk more about what actually happened, obviously, but it's a fascinating topic, and I would love to talk to some of his peers from the time. We'll probably never get the chance. Any rate, let's pretend for a moment that this really was his swan song and was going to be his swan song. And, in some ways it seems like such an incongruous choice. But one of the fascinating things that I learned in researching this was that this actually was a movie Soderbergh had been trying to make for literally more than half his career. All the way back in the spring of 2000, during the production of Traffic, Soderbergh talked with Michael Douglas about the idea of making a film about Liberace. There's this great interview in Out and About Nashville that I mined for a lot of information. And here's a quote when he was speaking to them. He said, "It was an opportunity to make use of all the hours that I've spent watching melodramas like Sunset Boulevard, anything connected to a certain aesthetic that we associate with camp or just glamour." Now, he didn't want to make a boring biopic. He did, just like kind of a by the numbers, life story of Liberace, of course, because that wouldn't be Soderbergh. But he couldn't find the right approach. Until someone told him about Scott Thorson's book, Behind the Candelabra, My Life with Liberace. Scott Thorson, of course, being the man who was, a partner of Liberace for years, in the late 70s to the early 80s, I believe. So I guess Soderbergh picked up the rights because in the summer of 2008, he contacted Richard LaGravenese, the man who made his career when he wrote The Fisher King on spec and sold it to Terry Gilliam, and asked him if he would like to adapt it. And according to LaGravenese, Soderbergh's email, his pitch, was 3 sentences. He wrote, "I have this Liberace biography. Would you be interested? I'm not kidding."
Which I love. I love that he had to throw in, "I'm not kidding."
Yeah, I love it. Like, to the point. Like, you're the right guy. I've got this project, and yeah. So obviously, LaGravenese was in because he signed up. That fall, 2008, Variety announced that Soderbergh was planning to make the movie and that he wanted Douglas and Damon for the leads. Remember, this is really early. The Girlfriend Experience hadn't even come out yet. Now, a year later, in fall 2009, Douglas officially agreed to play opposite Damon, so they were both on board. But despite having 2 of Hollywood's biggest and, dare we say, straightest stars, Soderbergh had trouble getting funding for the movie. This is another quote from Soderbergh, quote, "Nobody would make it. We went to everybody in town. We needed $5 million. Nobody would do it. They said it was too gay. Everybody." This was after Brokeback Mountain, by the way, which is not as funny as this movie. I was stunned. It made no sense to any of us. So Soderbergh clarified that he didn't feel this was anti-gay bias in the industry necessarily, but a belief that only gay people would want to watch the movie.
Which is kind of hilarious because Soderbergh and Channing Tatum didn't realize that women and gays were going to show up in droves for Magic Mike.
Right. Excellent point. It's so funny. You everybody has their blind spots, I guess. And it's also weird too, because like Soderbergh told Out and About Nashville that internet buzz and excitement from gay men was one of the reasons Warner's actually picked up Magic Mike. Anyway, Soderbergh and producer Jerry Weintraub spent the next several years trying to finance this, fairly low budget film. I don't believe that the $5 million was the budget. They said they had a fair amount of financing squared away, but they needed $5 million more,
right,
to make it. But it's a pretty low budget movie with big name stars, and they just couldn't get it done. And according to LaGravenese, Douglas and Damon continued to insist they were attached, which is pretty impressive. A lot of people would have pulled out if they smelled failure.
Yeah, well, they trust in Soderbergh.
Yeah, and obviously, again, they have worked with him before, so they know he's a serious guy, and they believed in the project. But very impressive. They're certainly, without their names, I suspect that it never would have gotten made. Period. Another reason for the delay was that Douglas had been diagnosed with and treated for throat cancer during this whole long period. And so, that was a huge complication. Fortunately, he ended up being successfully treated. And when the movie was finally made, he thanked Soderbergh and Damon for, waiting for him. LaGravenese had done some periodic rewrites during this whole period as Soderbergh had new ideas and took it to new people to try to get funding. And obviously Soderbergh was continuing to make other movies in the meantime, but Thorson's book remained the primary inspiration throughout. One thing that I did learn that's very interesting is the scenes of the alimony lawsuit at the end. The dialogue for that actually came from court transcripts because those were not in Thorson's book. Very interesting that when Thorson sued Liberace for palimony, it was the first time in U.S. history that a man had sued another man for palimony.
Really?
Yeah, they weren't legally married. They couldn't have been at that time,
sure.
But they were in effect married. They lived together as kind of common law spouses. And weirdly, Liberace had told Thorson that he wanted to adopt him as his son. So, it's, maybe that's legally all that he could have done. So maybe that was kind of like the marriage gesture. I don't know.
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on in that dynamic. I think Nicky Cat points it out as well. What do you say? It was like, oh, he's going to adopt the guy. It's, the guy's fucking you is going to adopt you. That's cool law.
Yeah. Love Nicky Cat. Nice little role for him in that movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, eventually HBO Films came to the rescue and gave Soderbergh a budget of $23 million, and the movie was finally greenlit.
Yeah, which seems like a very natural thing for Soderbergh. Like, I think, I think there's two things that makes me think is that, like, one is that, like, and we've said this a lot, and we're just going to continue to talk about, because he keeps doing different ways. Like, he is very willing to experiment in many ways. He's an experiment with cameras. He's an experiment with how films are released. We've talked about with Che. We've talked about with Bubble. We've talked about girlfriend experience. So he is going to always be comfortable pushing those boundaries, and we're going to see that he continues to do so. So, like, he would not. I see that, like, he would never be troubled by this being an HBO movie. And granted, like we said, HBO is prestige. It's not like this is coming out on, like, CBS or, like, a movie of the week thing. WB, yeah, not to denigrate those places, but like, HBO has a certain quality to it that I'm sure made it easier for him to agree, and he's willing to take those chances. But I also think, like, at the heart of it as well, like, we've said this again to something we've said before. He just wants to work. And if, like, the movie's going to get made and the movie's going to get released, like, I don't think he's ever going to kind of poo-poo, like, oh, no. Like, it cannot be this. It must be a theatrical release. And like, it's funny, people give David Fincher shit, because he's basically just doing Netflix stuff at this point, which in a way is kind of a bummer, because we all want to see his movies on the big screen. We all want to experience that. We want the biggest canvas, the biggest audience, the theatrical experience, because his movies are kind of made for that, But, like, if this is how he's getting his stuff made and they're willing to give him robust budgets, why would he say no? And I think Soderbergh's same thing. Like, he's not going to argue with the vehicle in which he's getting his thing out there. Like, Candelabra still exists. You can get it streaming now.
Not on Blu-ray.
Yeah, on Blu-ray. There's nothing. Once the dust settles, the initial release of a theatrical release or an HBO release happens, once that initial kick occurs, after that, every movie just becomes the same. It's going to be on Blu-ray. It's going to be on streaming. Now, granted, that's not how things were in 2013, quite like that. But now, no matter how it's released, they all ended up in the same bin anyway. So that's the life of the movie. And that is far longer than the, 6 weeks it's going to be in a theater, or the 3 weeks it's going to be, in the top 10 on the streaming charts.
Yeah. Excellent points. So the film was shot, the HBO film was shot over 30 days in 2012. And so from all told, from idea to completion, it was a 12-year development period, right? Which is only, and I did this math pretty carefully. I'm not good with numbers, but I think I got this right. It was only 11 years from Sex, Lies, and Videotape to the time he started talking about Candelabra, right? So, at the beginning of the episode, I was kind of, jokingly talking about this as, like, it feels like it came out of left field as his kind of swan song, but really, this does seem like a passion project that he was sticking with, and that he was coming back to again and again, and he was nurturing to completion.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was obviously invested. We've talked about a few projects that he was, and he tends to get most of them done. We've talked about the movies that slipped through his fingers. And it's interesting that we never really came across, I mean, probably because it did get made, but we never came across, like, in all the near misses that we've unearthed, we never came across this as being one of these long development movies until now. I had no idea that he had it in the works for as long as it was.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of the other ones that he was involved with or on board with or trying to get made for a much shorter period of time have kind of entered into legend. Cleopatra the musical, for instance. But this one is less well known for some reason.
Yeah. And there was bigger, the other ones like Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Moneyball. They're much, bigger things that he didn't get. But yeah, I think we should talk about the cast, right? Because the cast is You know, it's again, he's going to his rogues gallery, of familiars.
Soderbergh's 11.
So, oh, wow. Oh, wow. We should do an episode of Soderbergh's top 11.
Yeah,
Uh,
I actually hate to reveal this while we're recording. I've actually been working on a list of his most frequent collaborators because it's so fascinating.
Really? Oh, there's your episode. Okay, we're ready. Thanks for doing all the work.
It's not done. It's not done.
Okay, so here's who we have in this movie. It's really cool. You have Michael Douglas, obviously, is Liberace, or Lee, as he was known to his friends. Matt Damon, who we mentioned, is Scott Thorson. Scott Bakula. I love it when Scott Bakula pops up and stuff. He was in The Informant, and he was great. Here, he's Bob Black, the film producer who introduces Thorson to Liberace. You have Tom Papa as Ray Arnett, Liberace stage choreography. Nicky Katt as Mr. Y, I guess. He's Thorson's dealer. And then there's one other one that Soderbergh's buddy from Ocean's 11. I can't remember his name. He's early in Behind the Candelabra. He was in Schizopolis. He was in the Ocean's movies. Oh. The nervous guy. Oh gosh, I forget his name.
Oh yeah.
He's only in Soderbergh's movies because they were friends together in New Orleans. His name, but he was in there. It just came to mind as I was reading, we have our list here, so we don't forget. But there was other people in addition to that he hadn't worked with before, including a really interesting Rob Lowe. He's the plastic surgeon who's also just a plastic surgery disaster. Like he's the Dr. Feelgood, who gets Scott hooked on the California diet, which are diet pills. And it's a hilarious looking performance. I read how he was saying how he wore in the movie this wig, and underneath the wig is he was taped, basically. He had everything taped back and up, because he doesn't look, Rob Lowe looks great. He's like 60 years old, that guy. But for the movie, he had the wig on, and the wig was meant to disguise the way that they basically just stretched his skin back and pulled it all back. He likened it to old performances in the 40s and 50s, the way people pre-practice plastic surgery would just scratch their face and clip it back, more or less. And that's what they were doing in this movie.
It's so amazing. He just has this weird face, and he uses it to great effect. It feels like he's always kind of squinting out of these little slitty eyes, but his affectlessness makes him this kind of perfect cipher California guy who's just kind of soulless or something, and anything Lee wants, he's going to give him. And when Liberace brings out this portrait of himself as a younger man and says, "I want you to make Scott look like this," he kind of squints at it. It's like, "Oh, I see. Yes, I can do that."
Yeah, that was a horrifying moment.
Yeah, Rob Lowe, great in Behind the Candelabra.
I play Dr. Startz, who is the Beverly Hills plastic surgeon to the stars. How do you look like you've had a horrific facelift?
Oh, I see. Oh, yes, I think I can do what you want.
There's lots of tape. You have to wear a wig. It's wrapped around the back of your head. It hurts like hell.
So in addition to Rob Lowe, who's a new addition to the Soderbergh universe, you have Dan Aykroyd, who was really good. I'm not a huge Aykroyd guy, but he was nicely underplaying it as Seymour Heller, who's Liberace's manager. Boyd Holbrook, who I was going to say a young Boyd Holbrook, but he seems really young now. So, he must have been younger. Cheyenne Jackson, Paul Reiser, David Koechner.
Koechner, I think.
Koechner. Okay, David Koechner, who's always good. I always like him. Paul Reiser. Yeah. I love Paul Reiser's last 10 years that he's been doing of his career. Just solid work, everything he pops up in.
Yeah, agree. He kind of grew out of being mad about you or whatever.
Definitely. He pops up in things when his performance in Whiplash as the father was fantastic. And then you have Debbie Reynolds, the wonderful Debbie Reynolds as Liberace's mom, and that is her final role.
Yeah, and interesting, she actually knew Liberace in real life and had met his mom, so she was able to base her impression of Liberace's mom on face time, which is really fascinating. A really interesting link between kind of old showbiz, old Hollywood, and new. It's a minor role, but she kills in her scenes, particularly a scene where she's playing the one-armed bandit that Liberace has had installed for her to play, but it's not loaded with coins. So when she wins, there's no coins, and instead of just laughing it off, she's a little upset. She actually wants to be paid off, and kind of an amazing moment where Liberace asks his maid if she has any money on her, and it's like, come on, man.
Then she takes a check, right?
Yeah, she says he'll take a check.
Yes. And also another connection, which is really interesting. I had seen that at Liberace's funeral. Now, when Liberace died of AIDS complications. I think everyone knows that. So not many celebrities show. Not as far as I was read, there's only 2 celebrities who showed up to his funeral because I think he was ostracized because of the time. Very sad, obviously. But one of the celebrities who did show up was none other than Kirk Douglas, Michael Douglas's dad. They lived down the street from each other. And Michael Douglas said he remembers seeing Liberace around, but he never really met him or spent time with him. Keir, you pointed out that you probably don't see Liberace unless he's at his top most fabulous. He's probably not going to be in the public eye at all. So I can imagine you don't really see him walking around the neighborhood, but apparently Kirk Douglas and he was friends, and two celebrities show up to his funeral, and oddly enough, Kirk Douglas was one of them.
Michael Douglas described having seen him as a kid in the neighborhood roll up in one of his fantastic cars, dressed to the nines, full on Liberace. Yeah, I don't think Liberace left the house in sweatpants.
No, I don't think so either.
Although there are some great tracksuits in Behind the Candelabra, but that's when they're staying at home.
Right.
Now, it was fun to see a couple of comics show up in this because Soderbergh started working with comics on The Informant, a ton of comics, stand-up comics in that, and he clearly still likes it and has really found something worthwhile in working with them. So talking about Tom Papa, Papa.
Yes.
At any rate, so the Las Vegas scenes were filmed at Zsa Zsa Gabor's and Siegfried and Roy's mansions, which I love. So again, some real life Las Vegas glitz. I guess that Liberace's home was still there and still vacant, but it was across the street, I guess, from some really rundown properties, which kind of made it challenging to shoot. Liberace's West Hollywood penthouse was also used as a real set. It was apparently like an office space at that point, but they got the people to move out, and then they refurnished it pretty much as it was when he lived there. So that's a very realistic set. And then the on stage scenes were filmed at the Las Vegas Hilton, where he actually performed. So a lot of verisimilitude there. And the pianos in the film originally belonged to Liberace, including the blinged out pianos in the dueling pianos scene, where he's playing with Cheyenne Jackson as his protege side by side. Those are actual Liberace pianos.
Yeah, I find that such a cool detail. That's, just using his, penthouses and stuff like that is so interesting. That's really neat. I really like that a lot. And in addition to that stuff, this is kind of interesting. A very rare use of CGI. Soderbergh never does CGI.
No.
He doesn't even like to use lights. So him going CGI is really interesting. And I was curious about this myself because I was like, wow, is that Michael Douglas playing the piano? But turns out the piano playing was performed by Philip Fortenberry, Juilliard trained piano virtuoso who for years performed a one-man show called Liberace and Me at the Liberace Museum. He and Douglas would both perform at the piano, and then Douglas's head was composited onto Fortenberry's body. Apparently he had no problem playing the piano parts, but found it difficult to do with the heavy rings on his fingers. They had to, and I wonder about this, they had to glue them on. What does that mean? That's
what Fortenberry says, right? So, and I presume that's what you did when you were writing your one sentence summary. You glued the rings on.
No, they're all custom.
So they fit. Okay.
Yeah, I put a lot of time and money, unnecessarily amount of money into those rings. But yeah, the film was scored by the great Marvin Hamlish, who Soderbergh also had hired to do The Informant. And sadly, it was Hamlish's final film work, as he died after completing it in August of 2012. He was an EGOT winner who also scored The Sting, The Way We Were, and wrote the theme song for The Spy Who Loved Me. The song, Nobody Does It Better. And the film was dedicated to him, which is very nice.
Yeah, not my favorite Bond song, but Hamlish was definitely a great. And speaking of resting in peace, sadly, Scott Thorson died earlier this year on August 16th. He wasn't particularly old guy, but he had a sad life after getting dumped by Liberace. He wrestled with drugs for many years. He got arrested multiple times. He did time a couple of times, I think. He really struggled with his life after Liberace, although he kind of maintained mixed feelings about him. I believe until he died, he would go on Larry King or whatever and talk about his time with Liberace, and there was fondness there, but there was also bitterness. A weird side note in all this is that Thorson was a witness for the prosecution during nightclub owner Richard Nash's trial for the infamous 1981 Wonderland murders. And if you don't know about the Wonderland murders, there are true crime podcasts, documentaries. There's plenty of information out there. Very salacious, very famous, particularly because the porn star John Holmes was involved. So apparently, Thorson was buying drugs at Nash's house and saw porn star Holmes being beaten until he revealed the identity of the gang of thieves who had robbed Nash earlier. After Holmes gave up the names, 4 people were murdered in retribution. And when Nash's trial ended in a hung jury, Thorson entered the witness protection program. Crazy story.
Wild, man. This guy is just a wild life, this guy. Yeah, that's a crazy story. And the Wonderland murders were, of course, the inspiration for the great scene in Boogie Nights in which Dirk Diggler tries to rob a drug dealer, played wonderfully. I love this guy. Such a great performance from Alfred Molina.
Hey, you want to see something really fascinating? Okay. Check out. Oh, sweet. Huh?
That thing's not loaded, is it?
Not yet.
Is that silver? Look. So that's not. Don't point. Don't you not point the gun, please, sir? Todd.
Why, you think I can't do it?
No.
Huh?
Wait. No.
Don't. You think I can't do it?
Sir,
wait. Well, you want to see me do it? Huh?
You dare me?
Huh?
No, we don't dare you. Dare me? Fucking dare!
Your fucking faces, man.
That scene still makes me jumpy. Well done, Alfred Molina. Well done, Paul Thomas Anderson. Well done, everyone involved. So Behind the Candelabra premiered at Cannes on May 21st, 2013, and debuted on HBO just a few days later on May 26th. And it had a theatrical release in the UK on June 7th of that year.
How many of you remember the boogie woogie craze? Play that part again so you can all shout hey, okay? You want to do it again, don't you?
So, Mike, what did you think of Soderbergh's Swan Song? I'm using a lot of air quotes this episode.
Well, we're doing the video. You're making full use of the video. So anybody's listening to audio, there's a video component. What did I think of Behind the Candelabra? I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I didn't love it. It's not my favorite. I'll be honest. And this probably, I don't say probably, definitely affects my enjoyment of it. I don't like biopics. Like, rarely do I like biopics at all. In fact, and strap in for a journey through Mike's personal unwritten rules of cinema, I think biopics are antithetical to the purpose and power of cinema.
Well, Gene, you're wrong, because I think cinema's purpose is to create empathy and bring us closer to people, and biopics, when they're well done, of course, are just one of the many cinematic tools for doing that. I'm sorry to make you Gene in this scenario. I do love it when we disagree, Mike.
That is a really good Roger. I mean, hey, I can't argue with Roger and movies being empathy machines. There's no argument that I can have for that. But I will
pull out the big guns.
All right, you come in hot. But I will say this. I'll maybe clarify a little. Here's the thing. I think 99% of the time that movies work better when they are removing and portraying a slice of someone's life, real or fictional, doesn't matter what, and dramatizing this narrative high point of their existence, whatever it is, this focused, centralized bit, So whether it be, the time that they got betrayed by Waingro, or they got killed at Camp Crystal Lake, or the moment the person realized they were a replicant. Doesn't matter. The movies function best and most profoundly when they give vital moment from somebody's life. I really believe that movies are about that vital, absolute. I am this person, or this epic event, or whatever it is, because of this moment is tied into that. The moment can be small in scale, but big in how profound it is, and big in its effect. Now, biopics, on the other hand, to me are like a drone canvassing the surface. It's like you're distant enough to be beautiful, but too far to capture any real detail, any meaningful detail. Any story that tries to capture like a sum of a life, in my opinion, more times than not, is just kind of doomed to fail. Like, despite how grand movies can be, and sometimes ought to be, lives are too big. Existence is too big, and trying to capture that scale is, more times than not, it's a fool's errand. And therefore, I don't like biopics. I just don't think they work. But that said, Behind a Candelabra isn't quite that. It's not quite that. I fully admit it. It's not a biopic of the entirety of Liberace or Thorson's life. Specifically, it's more about Thorson than it is about Liberace, probably. Yeah. It's safe to say. The way that, two movies that I really don't like, despite saying before how I like James Mangold, Walk the Line and Ray, are two movies that I really don't like. I mean, those are, childhood to death, or almost, whatever, like end of life, and it's just too vast. It's too big. You just like I said, you're just skimming the surface and just flying over it. Now, Soderbergh is too smart to do that. He's trying to capture something more essential, not just about Liberace and Thorson, but about the power dynamics between the two, and how, Liberace is kind of like just the embodiment of entertainment. Like, he is an entertainer and he is entertainment. And what entertainment does is that chews people up and it spits them out. And that's literally his cycle. We see it. Like, Thorson is the most meaningful person that he chewed up and spit out, but we knew it happened before him and we knew it happened again after him. So that is an important, interesting thing. And I like that. I like what he's doing there. And I like his perspective on Thorson's life as well. And largely the movie does succeed. Like, the relationship between Thorson and Liberace is interesting. It really is. And their dynamics are interesting. But in the performances, I'll say this, are terrific. Everyone in this movie is great. Douglas and Damon especially are fantastic. A lot of the movie succeeds just because of how good they are. And yet the movie's kind of like side effects for me. It's just kind of okay. It's unfortunate because, at this time, Side Effects' his last theatrical release. Behind a Candelabra is ostensibly his last movie. So if I I don't think I saw either at the time. I remember seeing Behind the Candelabra near its release on HBO, but I found it to be just fine. Behind the Candelabra, it feels ultimately Candelabra feels too casual for its own good. I feel like it's a little slow in parts. I feel like we get a lot of we get the sense yeah, I get what's going on here, and it's moving very languidly through their relationship, and where it's going. Once you get to the drugs and the power dynamics and stuff like that, you've kind of heard, not to wink too hard, but you've heard the song before. So I found myself a little bored at times. I think it's attributed to that distance. They're trying to cover so much ground that you really can't zero in on the moments, and that I find the biopics kind of follow the same rhythm. Anyway, I liked it well enough because the performances. I liked it because it was better than most biopics and more interesting than most biopics. But ultimately, I just thought it was okay. So how about you, Keir? I think you liked it more than me. What did you think?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And I actually agree with you to a point in that I don't like most biopics. And you make a truly compelling argument about why they don't work as well as movies that are pure fiction. I mean, you give me a lot of food for thought. I love your take on this, because I hadn't really thought in detail about why I don't generally gravitate toward biopics. However, I can think of some that have been, whether they're works of art or not, I can definitely think of some that have been wildly entertaining and that I love a lot, from I don't know, The People versus Larry Flint to Amadeus to Man in the Moon to, Soderbergh's own Aaron Brockovich, which, is just, I think, a very, wonderfully entertaining biopic. The fact that these are better than most comes down to filmmaking choices. So I'm not as hard on biopics as a genre as you are, but I agree, it's not typically the kind of thing I'm excited to see, because you're right, there are some absolute dogs in that genre.
There are, yes. And I generally don't even really like the performance. The reason I like Matt Damon so much, Michael Douglas is trying so hard to capture such a specific person, but I also have trouble with its impersonation, kind of. I think that the performances are more nuanced, like Aaron Brockovich and Scott Thorson are people that nobody knows who they are. So they're inhabiting a role, but it could just as well be a fictional person for all anybody knows, because we have no idea who they are. But when you're playing Ray Charles, it's oh, he's going to bob his head around a lot and play the piano.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a reason that I'm less interested in seeing Timothée Chalamet play Bob Dylan, because it's just half of the problem is where it's a person we know so well from his public appearances and his public life that we can't help but sit there and make the comparison, and that is distracting. So I agree. A lot of times biopics are more successful when it's somebody that we don't have a lot of face time with as people in the culture.
Right.
But yeah, back to Behind the Candelabra, when I thought about why I like it so much, I've had kind of a hard time putting it into words, because, the basic story is as old as showbiz itself. You've got a starry-eyed newcomer being blinded by the bright lights, falling in love with the lifestyle, actually falling in love for real, I think we can believe, before becoming disillusioned. And finally, he's spit out by the system in favor of a fresh new face. And, really, other than the titillating details of Liberace's lifestyle, there's not a lot more to it than that. But it's not really a conventional biopic, as Soderbergh clearly intended. What it is a cloistered, claustrophobic, sometimes funny and sometimes sad story of a relationship. I think tragicomic might be the right word. It's very sweet at times and cynical at others. And, you already alluded to this. What it comes down to, for me, is just the performances. The roles of Lee and Scott are both dream roles. They're meaty with long takes and lots of dialogue that require both big emotions and finely tuned emotional calibration. And both Douglas and Damon just deliver. We've talked before about how Damon doesn't really get the credit he deserves for his skill and range as an actor. And I think that's, arguably true of Douglas too. I think he's somebody who's thought of as a bona fide movie star, and he is that. But I think that we sometimes forget that in the right role, the man can, really remind us that he's a thespian too. I think both of them throw themselves into their performances with intelligence, honesty, and just the right amount of camp. Neither of them telegraphs that they think they're making a brave career choice or anything like that. They're just embodying the characters who happen to be gay or bisexual or heterosexual, as Thorson later claimed in his career, secretly heterosexual. I think that the very fact the movie is so intimate about the intimacy between its two leads weirdly makes it less prurient, less gawky. I think it makes their relationship real, sympathetic, and natural. And I was very engaged throughout.
It really was not the kind of thing I hesitated, and I assume Michael would hesitate about at all. This was a real opportunity, and we both jumped at it. And in terms of being in bed with Michael Douglas, I now have things in common with Sharon Stone, and that's really great. Glenn Close, we can all go out and now trade stories. Demi Moore,
When Matt told me the story of his Brazilian spray tan, I just felt that that the world really needed to see this, and so I was looking for opportunities, and we found them, and so I'm, you give the people what they want, and they'll show up.
We were trying to do this scene where, just to interrupt for a second, we were trying to do a scene where we wanted it to be a domestic. It's an argument. Steven staged it so that as the argument builds, I get closer and closer to the bed and eventually end up in the bed because, as with married couples, sometimes you get in an argument at the end of the day and it's not like you're going to leave the marriage. You're just, it's time to go to bed. So Steven staged it as the argument built. I got closer and closer, and I had explained to him in this parking lot in West Hollywood about my Brazilian tan line that I had to get to make some of the outfits fit and not show a tan line. And Steven sat there listening, and I said, it would be really great. I said, it's the wrongest thing you've ever seen. What if at the end of the thing, I drop the robe and get into bed and you see the, Brazilian tan line? And Steven just looked at me for a long time, and he goes, oh, I know where to put the camera.
Now, we've talked about tone in previous episodes, with The Informant in particular, another Matt Damon movie. And I think Soderbergh nails the tone here, too. No one involved in this movie is blind to the absurdity of Liberace's excesses, but, they show respect to him as a showman, and they're interested to a point in the why of it. How did a saloon pianist from suburban Milwaukee end up wearing the world's longest fur coat on stage in Vegas? Soderbergh is too smart to fall for any of the conventional biopic cheese, like flashbacks to his childhood where his mom is forcing him to practice piano. He just brings us into his world very matter-of-factly. And to me, the pacing at the beginning is very good. It just sweeps us right in. From the moment Thorson watches him perform on stage and goes, wow, it's one of the best wows in film. We may never fully understand Liberace, but we almost do, even as we marvel with our jaws agape at the way showing off his wealth became a significant part of his act, right? Like his piano playing was the draw, but definitely people came to watch the fur-lined capes too. And finally, I just found it fascinating to be inside his world at a time when most mainstream Americans, either had no idea he was gay, or if they knew, they pretended they didn't, so they could just enjoy his show without having to deal with their bigotry against gays. His being closeted certainly does cast some light on the reason he lived such a private, stay-at-home life for so long.
All I'm saying is, why can't we have fun? Just see people,
there are thousands
go
of
maybe
boys
do
who
a
love to be in your
party
position.
every once in a while.
All I do
maybe
is give, and no matter how much I buy you, it's never enough.
I'm not asking you to buy me anything, Lee. I'm crawling the walls a little, that's all. Why can't we see people?
What are you talking about? I just took you to the Jim Namer's Dom DeLuise concert.
Yeah, that was one time.
Scott, I'm tired. I work all night. This is
I
not
know, but you don't even let me go out by myself.
Why?
I don't know, just to go out and see people and talk to them and just for a break.
A break from me? Why
No,
do you need a break from me?
I don't need a break from. I mean, for you to come with me. God, I can't say anything right.
No, please, don't be unhappy. I can't stand it when you have a face like that. Especially after the money I've paid for it.
Oh, no, you want it back?
You want me to invite Charo for brunch again? You liked her.
Yeah, I like her fine, but...
But what? But what is it with you? It's never enough. What more can I give?
Look, I'm happy, okay? I am. It's just, you have to try to understand, being somebody's boyfriend, this is not exactly the life that I had planned for myself, you know? I mean, I was gonna be a veterinarian.
You want to help animals? Pick up the dog shit.
As I said earlier, Behind the Candelabra debuted at Cannes, where it was very well received, very well indeed, and even tipped to win Best Actor for Douglas and maybe even the Palme d'Or. It didn't win either of those, but Baby Boy the Poodle did win the coveted Palme Dog. It's like it's one step above or below Best Kiss in the MTV Awards. I don't know.
Yeah, neck and neck.
How did the release go, Mike?
A lot of people saw it. It debuted on HBO to 2.4 million views. Then 1.1 million more people tuned in for the repeat that aired immediately afterward. These were HBO's biggest numbers since 2004. So that's great. Wow. That's really good. Looking at it a different way, so you have 2.4 million plus the 1.1 gives you 3.5 million viewers. And if 3.5 million people go see a movie on opening night, $12 a movie ticket, you're looking at a Friday opening of $42 million, which is good. One day haul, $42 million. That's probably going to net you the way, you get your most, depending box office numbers, like Saturdays and Sundays are usually good for family movies. Horror movies are usually really, really front loaded. So it varies, but I would predict if someone told me, oh, this adult drama debuted to $42 million on Friday, I'd say that's probably an $80 million weekend haul. So pretty great. Although it didn't have a theatrical release in the US, so all those numbers are pure speculation. It did appear on screens in the UK and elsewhere, eventually earning $13.3 million. So, for what was it, a $23 million, $24 million budget?
33, I think it was.
All told. Okay, so it earned a little bit of it back. HBO is always making these movies and shows. That's part of how they get subscribers. So I think it's safe to say the movie was successful, and now it's lived on in streaming and Blu-ray and all that. So I think it's a successful movie. But how did the other side work? How did the critics respond to it?
Well, they liked it. They really liked it. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's one of Soderbergh's most well-received movies from critics with a 94% tomato meter. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian had some of the most well-crafted critical lines, calling it a bizarre anti-Pinocchio parable in which the power of loneliness and toxic love transform a handsome young man into a deeply unhappy, plump-nosed, cleft-chinned latex doll. That's a pretty good line.
It is.
He also wrote that it was mesmeric, riskily incorrect, outrageously watchable, and simply outrageous. Emily St. James of the AV Club wrote, the story is told less as a cause and effect narrative than as a collection of incidents that add up to something with a crushing emotional weight. Well, I thought that was a really nice take because it kind of helped me think about my challenge in explaining what I really liked about it, because it's not the plotting. It's the performance, but it's a well edited, and of course Soderbergh's a master editor, so it's a well crafted assemblage of all these scenes.
Yeah, and speaking of the edit, a weird fact that I came across: they finished shooting, according to Matt Damon, they finished shooting the film on a Friday, and he being Soderbergh, had a rough cut of the movie on Monday. Yeah, and wild.
Yeah, of course he did. That's mind blowing.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I listened to some interview with him recently where Soderbergh was talking about, he was saying he still can't believe that when he was shooting Sex, Lies, and Videotape, he didn't do any editing until he had shot everything. But of course, that's how most people work. but
Yes.
it's just not how he works anymore. And, he feels that his earlier films would have been better had he been editing as he goes along, as he does now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely truth to that. I mean, everyone has their own method, obviously, but I think there's some truth to that in the sense that, like, you start to, granted, I've only gone through, well, I helped with the editing process on Revealer. I was there with the director, Luke Boyce, and kind of advising as a writer, but not in control by any means. Holiday Holdup, which I partially directed, I was in that position. And when you get into the edit, you start seeing the movie for what it is, and I think if I ever made a movie again, I would probably be, and I was kind of like Soderbergh. I did have this in mind, the editing in your head as you go. Like we've talked about this before. There's the directors who are like, shoot it all and figure it out later.
Mm-hmm.
Or there's the editors who are the directors like Soderbergh who are like, no, I've kind of pre-cut it in my mind. So all I need is this, this, and this. And then I think once you have that narrow focus the way he does, that you're able to then sit down and editing, especially now digital, sit down at night, start putting things together, and you start to realize what the movie is, how it's rhythm, its internal rhythm, how it's playing, as they say. And that really helps you probably the next day to be like, okay, I'm discovering what this movie is as I go even deeper and deeper. And it helps you probably decide the next day's shots as well.
Yeah. And as a novelist, the thing I can kind of compare it to is I know some people will just write the first draft of the book as messy and as fast as they can. As I forget, but I've heard the term from several writers, vomit draft.
Yeah, the vomit draft.
Just vomit out and then go back and revise it. Now, I love revision, and I think you can definitely find a project in revision. But to me, I would worry so much that I was creating a bunch of stuff that I was just never going to even use or need, and I would be making my job harder. So I guess I'm a little more like Soderbergh in that when I'm drafting, I would really want to make each chapter pretty well edited, pretty good before moving on to the next, and make sure that there's a real cause and effect from chapter to chapter. Who knows? Maybe I'd be a much more famous, more successful novelist if I wrote vomit drafts. I don't know, but we just work the way we need to work. And so I would say my working method is a little closer to Soderbergh's, kind of edit as you go.
Yeah, me too. And I can't, I'm like, I have a trouble seeing the forest for the trees, so to speak. Like I can't, it just becomes too big at a certain point. And I look at it, I'm like, I struggle to make sense of it. Like what needs to happen now? If I have, and I'm a strict outliner, pre-planner as much as I can. Yep. If I just did the vomit draft or, go on a film and just shoot it all and now make sense of like all this footage, it's way, way, way harder for me because I struggle. I get lost in it.
Yeah. Films can be saved in editing and they can also be ruined in editing.
Absolutely.
A couple more quotes from critics. I just thought there were some really interesting ones. Richard Corliss of Time discussed the casting, observing that the rampantly heterosexual Douglas might seem a stretch as Liberace, but from the first moment on the Vegas stage, he nails the character, which quickly transcends mimicry for sympathetic evocation, which I thought was nice. And most of the praise was for Douglas's performance, and I get it. It's the more flamboyant, showy character. But as you said, it really is a little bit more of a movie about Thorson. David Thompson, writing in the New Republic, singled out Damon. He said, Douglas is more than acceptable, but Damon has made an unforgettable character. Scott Thorson is unknown, and he comes out of the dark as the story that needs to be told. So almost all the critics seemed to like it. There weren't too many dissents. There were a couple. Hank Stuver of the Washington Post groused, "The story as told is just too depressing, too empty, and most of all, too dead and gone." And because it aired on TV, the New York Times assigned it not to our favorite movie reviewer, Manola Dargis, but to TV critic Mike Hale. They have strict rules about these things. And Hale seemed to be watching something different from the rest of us. He wrote, quote, "There's something limited and limiting about Mr. Douglas's portrayal. Its brilliance feels as if it were all on the surface, a matter of expertise and professionalism. And the same could be said of Mr. Soderbergh's film, which has its premiere on Sunday on HBO. A cerebral gloss on and satire of a big old Hollywood biopic, it's full of smart, funny details, perfectly sewn in place, like rhinestones on one of Mr. Douglas's blinding costumes, but it's short on heart or heat."
I don't know if that's just the New York Times house style at the time, which it kind of is, just like a lot of big statements that like you have to kind of like you're like reading and scratching your head saying like I think I know what they're saying, like, but yeah, I feel like it's just channeling Dark. I feel like that was written by Dargis. I want to see if Mike Hale's a real person or not.
Yeah, I think she might have ghost written it for him because it really, again, talking about like the cool, cerebral, whatever, like that is such always her take. And it just feels like, or maybe he just read her reviews of Soderbergh and then kind of took it from there.
Just cut and paste a bunch of her reviews. He's like, I didn't even watch this thing.
So the movie was nominated for and won a number of awards, some of them kind of minor. Its biggest wins were 3 Emmys for Outstanding Television Movie, Michael Douglas for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Television Series or Movie, and Soderbergh for Outstanding Directing for a Television Series or Movie.
That's crazy. Soderbergh's got an Emmy and an Oscar. I actually didn't know that he was an Emmy winner. Like that's, just remarkable. Yeah. He needs the Grammy and Tony to be an EGOT winner, like Marvin Hamlish.
Like Marvin Hamlish. Yeah.
There you go. He can do it.
Only he had made his musical of Cleopatra and taken it to Broadway, maybe.
Damn it.
Anyway. So the movie also won a GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding TV Movie or Miniseries, a nice stamp of approval from the gay community. And Douglas picked up a Golden Globe and a Screen Actors Guild Award for his performance as well.
About what?
The director won at Cannes with his debut feature, Sex, Lies and Videotape, a benchmark in independent cinema. But now he says he's turning in his bullhorn and jodhpurs.
And you just want to ask me questions.
Has Hollywood got in the way of making movies?
That's one of a handful of thinking about 5 years ago that I'd like to have an exit strategy. My own feeling of needing to stop, destroy everything that I've done, see if I can rebuild and come at this from a completely different angle. It sort of become a primitive again. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if you can consciously do that, but I'm going to try.
And you're tweeting a novel. Is this true?
Yeah, I'm trying to take advantage of its limitations. I'm not sure how, but there's a muscle being exercised in this experiment that I know is connected to me trying to figure out the next version of me as a filmmaker.
You don't wake up in the night frightened that they won't let you back into this fabulous sweet shop, this fabulous dream factory, and they'll say to you, well, I'm sorry, Stephen, you turned your back on movies. Good luck with that Twitter thing, but the door's closed, my friend.
I'd be fine with that. I never imagined that all of this would happen to me, that I would have gone this far, been able to make as many films as I have and be able to control them. I've had plenty of fun.
So talking to Out and About Nashville, the article I referenced earlier in the show, Soderbergh told them, quote, I decided that actually this is great if this were, and I'm not saying it will be, the last movie I ever made. I would be very happy. I feel like it's connected in a lot of ways to the first film I ever made, and it's also a progression. The connection is that it's completely relationship driven, and most of it is about 2 people in a room, except the room is now a hot tub. Soderbergh's so funny. It's a progression in the sense that it's a much more mature piece of work than my first film. Obviously, it ought to be, but I'm able to do things, having done it for 24 years, that I wasn't able to do back then. And then when asked if he was still planning to retire, he said, in terms of movies, it's going to be a break. I don't know how extended. I'm just taking a break from that specific kind of work for a while to see if I can tear everything down and rebuild it. See if I can come back different.
Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting. That's really interesting. And he's had these moments before, we chronicled well in The Underneath, where he had to tear it down and build it back up again. And we both know, we've talked about this as the creative impulse to do that, just re-energize, if nothing else. But I have a thought in a moment, but just, I was thinking about this as you were reading. I was thinking about it earlier or yesterday, I think, where it's like, he's such a chameleon. He's so diverse. He's so different, everything that he does. I can't be like thinking, like, if you look at Michael Mann, for example, like, oh, what's a movie that Michael Mann should retire on? You know, and you're like, well, it's probably a male character driven by something that he wants, puts it obsessively above all else. And Tangerine Dream, if we get him to do the score, you know, like that's, and I'm not like diminishing. Like Michael Mann's one of my favorite filmmakers, but like I feel like that's like Ferrari is almost like the pinnacle, not pinnacle in terms of the best of his work, but it really kind of crystallizes and brings together a lot of his obsessions and a lot of his interests in like this guy who's just driven to do a certain thing. And he gives that great speech. Adam Driver gives that great speech, like take that turn. And if you die, you die. Like but you have to take that turn. And it's pretty terrific. But Soderbergh doesn't have that same obsessive, compulsive things that he's interested in, the things that he wants to convey. Yeah, he does a lot of stuff about human relationships. There is stuff I can see what he's saying about the progression, but like in general, like I can't think of what a final Soderbergh movie, what would his career culminate in? I really don't know what that movie would be, and that makes him so special. I'm trying to say in a good way. That's what makes him special. I don't know the culmination, and now we all know he's back. I don't know what the culmination of his movie making career could possibly be.
Yeah, and that's why it makes him such a fascinating subject, and that's why I just love following his career, because he keeps us guessing. You know, the two movies he's got coming up, great, more variety, and who knows, by the time if he continues to make movies until he can't make movies anymore, he might end up doing something very fascinating that we can't even conceive of yet in a format that we don't understand. I mean, who knows?
No, and he's talked about that. You know, he had this great quote that he said, and I forget when. It's one of these, you know, every so often you get these doomsday cinema's dying, movies are dying, etc. You know, like, and he's like, movies aren't dying. You know, like there is some young filmmaker out right now who's going to do something that you've never seen before and never heard of before, and it's going to blow everybody away, and no one's going to say that movies are dead or dying when that happens. And maybe it is him, because he's still it's interesting that he says that about somebody else and somebody younger, and I don't think he's wrong. I think that is going to happen, but it also can still be him. Like he still can, like Presence seems like a wildly entertaining and risky movie, so like it could still be him, and I think that's pretty special and pretty cool.
Absolutely. And you know, he's still young at heart, but it's just funny that he sure has spent a lot of time talking about retirement for a guy who at this point he was about to retire, didn't really sound like he was planning to retire.
No.
And he probably wouldn't have had to talk about it so much if he had just used the words like hiatus or sabbatical.
You'll be back, soon you'll see. You'll remember you belong to me. You'll be back, time will tell. You'll remember that I served you well. Oceans rise, empires fall. We have seen each other through it all. And when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. Da 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 da.
Listeners, we'll be talking all about Steven Soderbergh's wonderful, glorious inability to retire on the next episode of the Filmographers podcast. Do you have any thoughts on Behind the Candelabra, feedback, or suggestions for our show? Get in touch. You can reach us on Instagram at The Filmographers, on X at FilmographerPod, and on Letterboxd at Filmographers. Or just send us a good old-fashioned email at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com.
If you enjoy our podcast, and if you've made it this deep into the episode, I'm assuming you do, take a moment right now, please show your support by giving us a quick rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're on YouTube, click that little like button, subscribe, those things. The algorithm is a fickle beast, and those things help for YouTube, for the Apple Podcast, Spotify, for all of it. It's literally like 10 seconds. Like, it will not take time, maybe even less. You'll be doing us a huge favor when you let other people know about us by endorsing us through these reviews, telling your friends, doing all these things that are just don't cost anything and don't take a lot of time. So please do this. And remember, just know that people can't listen to us if they don't find us. And every little rating, all these reviews, they help our visibility. So please just take the moment. Please do that right now.
And if you write us an email, we'll read it on the show. And if you write us a good review, we'll read that on the show. Get creative, get interesting. Tell us what you really like or don't like about the show. Give us some feedback. We're totally open to that. We're the film nice guys, and we want to improve. So we're open to reasonable suggestions as well. Thanks, as always, to Kevin Lau, our producer, Gompson, who composed and played our theme music, and Cosmo Graff, who designed our logo. Join us next week on the Filmographers podcast when we'll discuss not only what Soderbergh actually did during his so-called retirement, but also his comeback movie, a little flick with a bunch of unknown actors whose working title was Hillbilly Heist.
Which I love. I wonder how it would have done at the box office had it stuck with that amazing title.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe better.
Maybe it would have gotten lucky